All right, welcome everyone to Executive Committee on April 14th, 7 o'clock. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Fisher?
Here.
Dr. Fisher's absent. She did let me know that she was not going to be able to make it.
Present.
Ms. Crimer?
Present. All right, motion to excuse Dr. Minna.
Second.
Okay, and all in favor?
Aye.
Great. All right, we have a pretty short and sweet agenda, and we're also going to keep it pretty short and sweet because it's 85 degrees in here. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Actually, let me modify the agenda. We do not have the minutes from February 3rd to approve, so we're going to push that to the next one. So all I have on the current agenda is updates on our committee priorities for this calendar year.
Can we leave it there? Just do a strike through and then?
Yep. Do I have a motion to approve as amended?
We're leaving it there, right?
I'm leaving it there, just
Okay.
yes, saying that it's tabled. Motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. All right.
Real quick, so the agenda is not online yet?
It's not posted to the Golf Manor website, but it is in your email.
Because I can't even get the Golf Manor website up. Did it go to my email by any chance?
Your Golf Manor email.
I don't have a Golf Manor email anymore.
Oh, that's in my inbox. That's what I've been sending things to.
When I left council, I know it shut down, so I don't know if it's been reactivated or not.
It has been reactivated. The issue is you'll need to meet with Brett because
Okay.
the server has changed on several times. So it's not a matter of just being able to go back into your settings and setting it up the way you have in the past. It will require different setup.
Okay.
It's easiest to just schedule a time with him. I believe some people have been able to get it done over the phone.
Yeah, I think I have him in my contacts. Let me double check.
Just reach out.
Danny, I don't
Okay.
have any other email other than your Golf Manor. If you want me to send it to your personal, I believe I can. I don't actually know if you'll be able to see it because I think you might have to log into the Golf Manor stuff to
Okay.
open it.
I was going to give you the
Yeah.
my regular email. DKN.
You're live.
That's okay.
Oh.
Just personal email.
Okay.
DKN EIPP7.
Got it.
And
Okay, cool.
maybe rethink it. I was like, huh? Maybe I'll say Yahoo and then tell her Gmail later.
All right, it's in your inbox now. But again, I sent a link, so I don't know if you'll be able to access it outside of
Okay.
being in the Golf Manor.
I said you're live.
Yes.
Everybody knows.
Yes.
I'm okay with it.
All right, so all we're looking at is the priorities. So again, we had talked last time about the priorities that we had carried over from the last fiscal year, the last calendar year, which was an onboarding system. We had talked about that. I believe Minna shared everything that she had put together with the new solicitor. We had talked about the management audit that you had conducted, David, and what might next steps be on that. And then the website that Ms. Smale is working on. And I had brought up an idea for community input. How might we get some community input on our strategic priorities? Danny, I don't believe you were at the last meeting, but if you had any priorities that you wanted to talk about that might fit with executive.
The question is whether they fit with an executive. I do. Let me pull my cheat sheet up. And I know one of the key things I wanted to, and this might be outside the purview of this committee, but I was wondering if we could talk about the village administrator search.
Mm-hmm.
And based on the feedback I've gotten, it just seems like that's a high priority, and it may already be, but I was just curious if you guys could kind of update me on where we are with that and how to expedite that, because I think that's a huge factor.
Yeah, so far the executive committee has not been a part of the village administrator search or the police chief search. We had both of those active at the beginning of the year. And from my understanding, it is not the business of executive to be a part of those.
I can give you an update on that process. So, for instance, with the police chief nomination, had an extensive process for that. Eric helped set up that process of making sure that, well, we got input from Amberley Village to make sure that it was like a beyond reproach process, right? That's outlined in my, I believe, my most recent mayor's report. That whole process is outlined in there. I went ahead and made my recommendation to council. It's now on them to vote my nomination.
Okay.
Now, right? The with regard to the search for a village administrator, want to do the same kind of very like beyond reproach process. Have spoken to Center for Local Government on how to do this. They do this all the time. All right. It's a group called what was it, Ohio Plan. All right. Met with Mike. I forget what his last name is. This was all going to be part of my marriage report. Wasn't expected to be able to speak on this evening. But they have a basically I'm moving forward with that because I have put out information on two folks to give you some of the background. I did, as soon as I realized that we need to fill a position, I looked for someone to be like a part-time, not a part-time, but a temporary person who wasn't interested in it because I wanted to make sure that we had time to really vet a long-term person, but we needed someone in that could act immediately. It was too much of a shotgun wedding. People didn't want to vote on it. We haven't been able to get quorum since then. I have given out more alternatives.
Well, it's not that we haven't been able to get quorum. You haven't properly noticed the meetings. So we haven't been able to have a couple of the meetings for that reason, not that council is not showing up.
Yeah, that did happen. Also, there was a issue with our communication. So like I was asking, are we going to have quorum? Wasn't hearing back from anybody, so I removed it.
We changed the email servers again. So council didn't have access to email for a long time.
Okay. So so anyway, there are
So kind of the focus is a little more a shorter term to kind of steady the ship, and then we can do a deep
council
dive.
members have all
I'm good with that.
the contact information for these folks to come in. They got two people to look at. I've expressed what my recommendation would be concerning those two.
Okay.
To have someone come in and take over as an interim person. All right. So council has that all that information. I think I've followed all the requests that council has made about getting as much information about these people to be able to reach out to them so that it's not a shotgun kind of thing. So I believe they've had that information for about a month and a half now. And my understanding from the candidates is that no one's reached out to them yet, but they are willing to be here at the next council meeting as well to field any questions in person. As far as getting the long-term person in place, I've made the decision that because even just getting a temporary person in is taking months in order to get it pulled off, even with contact information being out there, and everything, that I'm just pulling the trigger on going with getting this procedure in place, not making the decision who the person is going to be, but starting that process of getting applications into us of who these who's interested in the long-term positions.
Okay.
Right. So, and I have for my mayor's report and for our next council meeting, I'll be giving people like what that contract looks like and what all, how council will be involved and all that.
Okay. And that correlates for kind of what I was hearing. I just wanted to kind of get a feel. And to Brittany's point, it's not an executive thing. So I'll move on from that because it's not an executive thing so that we don't bake. But thank you.
Cool. Are there any priorities, Danny, that you might have for executive to take up in this next calendar year?
Not at this time. I think what I'll do, some of the questions and thoughts that I had, I'll kind of run through you and Eric and the mayor and David to see if they're appropriate for this committee.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Some of it's just simple stuff. But.
And then David, you weren't here, I think, the last time, if my memory is correct. So we did not get an update of what that might look like for the management audit that you had conducted and how that might come into this year.
Right, so what I mentioned the last time I was here, but I don't know if that was, I think I missed one in between, was that,
No, you and I were here. We just didn't have quorum.
That was when I had the flu.
Yeah.
March, okay, yeah.
Totally okay. I was just
So my,
Yeah, no.
joking.
my idea really is that it's very hard to work on seeing if the management is managing and if people are working when
There's
the
no
whole
management.
entire management is non-existent. So as soon as we could get somebody in, then we will work based on the job description and work from there, make sure that they are doing their work. We got involved in doing this, we were dealing with people that were already in the position, trying to see if they're actually doing what they're supposed to be doing, and then that was what we had. But here it's a different whole game, and as soon as we get people into their positions, we will stop running to make sure they're keeping up with that, with what they're supposed to be doing. Good idea. There is one worker now that technically is officially supposed to be managing and doing, but he's supposed to have a manager on top of him. And that is non-existent
Right.
at this point, or we have a temp, but it's not really
Mhm.
doing anything. That's my,
Yeah, it
Well,
sounds
you're
like
auditing-
the assessment would be skewed if
right.
you don't have managers in place.
Your audit included like the service department, the police department, which has changed, the administrator, which has changed. Okay. So you only have one person who's still
there.
is still managing others, but
That
their
is
boss is
managing
not.
others,
Yeah.
But a second layer of
Yes.
the pyramid. that
Yes.
His manager is supposed to make sure he's managing.
Yeah.
Is.
I wonder if there's anything that we can put together so that when the interim village administrator comes in and the longer village administrator comes in, they have some of those, for the people who are still here, some of those things that we identified.
If I may, I can address a lot of that. No one's asked me any questions on this, but one of the things that I put in place, knowing that we need to smooth the transition of someone coming in or onboard them very fast, is each of the department heads provides me a report. I've got a couple of people who aren't department heads that I'm asking for reports as well, weekly, what it is that they're doing this week, right? And so we discuss that on a weekly basis. And my understanding is that they haven't had to do that in the past, but I have a running record from the past couple of months for the two main department heads. So I have it for maintenance, I have it for police, don't have it for fiscal, have about half of them for IT. As far as like what they're doing on a weekly basis, what are the major pressure points, what's going on, what needs to be fixed, when did it get fixed, that kind of stuff. So I've got records on that. As a way to onboard. What's that?
Do you mind if I see that?
Happy to show it to you. That's part of the reason why I was creating it, was so that, because I knew there were questions about, like, what do these people do?
In response to that, the fiscal officer does provide all of us the finances and.
Correct, yeah.
We feel pretty confident in the fiscal department, more than any other department in the village.
I didn't mean that as a jab. He and I have been talking about how to get those reports in.
I didn't say this as a jab.
No,
Just descriptive.
I think it would be helpful, David, for you to add in some of the nuance that you heard, because you talked to not just the managers, but you also talked to the employees and got some really good information about how we could improve things that you could add into that report. So not just what it is that they're doing, but some opportunities for that as well would be helpful.
Yes, if you could share that to me, with me.
yeah, we'll need to talk about the scope of the executive committee, because there has been at some point in the culture of council with previous leadership administration, has switched into that, like, executive committee is the executive of the village, and that's not the definition of executive committee. It never has been. And legal has advised us that the scope is not that broad for executive committee.
So what did he advise is the scope?
He said it was legislation, and to the extent that you want to change policy and everything, the council has the authority to go after that as through ordinances, through resolutions, that kind of stuff. And executive committee, we've talked about that being the starting place for all legislation, unless it's clearly something that's just finance. But even in some cases, when it's obviously both, it might start in finance, but then go over to executive for further review.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, so there's there was a drifting or an overstepping of the committee's oversight in the past, like recent past or past 10 years? Is this has just been a deep cultural thing, or is it just something that's occurred in the past year, 2 years, 5 years kind of thing? And
Past 2 to 5
can
years,
you dive down a little bit on kind of where they were maybe commenting on where legislators should not be commenting on? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, obviously, these are elected officials and, with regard to their duty on council, they can talk about, as the.
I was talking about
presider of that
executive. I
meeting.
thought you were saying executive was kind of overstepping its bounds a little bit. So
That
I
is
want-
what he's saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm wanting to understand that a little bit better, where that might have occurred. You don't have to get super specific, but
I believe.
because like earlier, our conversation, I realized was outside the purview of the scope. You were exactly right, and that's why I kind of cut you off a little bit.
I think this will get to the point of it.
Yeah.
So there was the administrator that we had in the past, rightfully so, when there was issues that he felt that even though they were within his discretion, thought, you know what, I should probably, or I don't want the full responsibility of this, I want council to weigh in on it, right?
Mhm.
We put it to council, all right? And then there was, at some point, there was dissatisfaction with some of the things that the administrator was doing. And I believe you can look at the record itself in terms of who was championing the change, trying to get some change going on with the administration.
Mhm.
And in their pursuit of that, took on responsibilities that then weren't challenged by me, frankly.
Okay.
All right.
I don't understand what you're saying at that last part.
Uh,
You're alluding to somebody wanted to change something and then overstepped?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was trying to not get into too many specifics, because actually there's some litigation going on with some of this. But so there was.
I guess we can speak
So
conceptually.
I think, here's the
Conceptually-
thing. So the purpose of executive as outlined on the website is different than what Stefan is saying our purpose should have actually been
Right.
and actually is. So the purpose of executive committee, as stated on the Goff Manor website, is works with the administration to monitor, make recommendations to council on strategies and legislation related to safety, health, operations, infrastructure, property maintenance, police, environmental, and other issues not directly related to financial issues. What I understand Stefan to now be telling us is we need to stay in our lane, and our lane is legislative. We're not doing strategy stuff.
That's what I was hearing. That sounds very broad.
Exactly. And
that
I think
is-
that is what executive, in my past understanding, before I was chair and as chair, this is what we were given. Because if you remember my first couple meetings,
Yeah.
we were, do you want us to go after property? Like, do you want us to get permission to go into rental properties and make sure they're up to code? These were the things that were brought to us, not legislative issues. We were brought parks master plans, things like that. Again, that's more strategic things, not legislation things. And what I understand Stefan to be saying is we now only are making recommendations on how to actually change our legislation. I don't know what he's alluding to.
I can
But-
clarify that. I'm sorry, I was so
Well,
broad with it.
well,
Yeah,
Let me kind of react to that first. My understanding from my time on council and executive was that was way broader than what I understood, what you read
This
there.
is just what's on the website.
And it was closer to what you kind of described earlier. It's like, hey, do we need an ordinance to keep grass clippings from the street? And that's what legislative talks about, or if executive. If executive, here's a problem of something that probably should be a code violation, they can bring it up and have it brought to council, and council can decide, yeah, let's look in deeper to that and focus on that stuff. My immediate question is going to be, what's in the charter and how does that address it? Because I know we redid the charter pretty much when I came on council. It was like the first thing that happened in council. They adjusted the charter, and it needs to be looked at about every 5 years, we figured. So I would say, let's focus on that. And if we need to, personally, I'd like to see it broader, a little more like that, because I want to kind of get in there and understand what the strategy is, maybe help develop a strategy, but that's probably a council thing, and I'm not on council, so that's just not my place.
So two things, if I may.
So I want to know where the guardrails are.
Right.
And I think
Okay.
we're
I think that's
asking
very
we are asking legal counsel to provide that to all of the committees and to council, because that's not clarity that we have had, and there's disagreement on like what the guardrails are.
Okay, very smart.
There's, my understanding is that around the committees, there is a disagreement about what the guardrails are under the charter. I define what executive committee, the functions of the committees, and so Brittany was very clear.
Oh, so the
about
mayoral position
what the-
can expand it. Okay.
Yes, that's what I was gonna say. that
I got you.
If there is interest in some of these things, the person to talk to about it would be me
Okay.
saying, hey, we think we should, or we.
I didn't have anything in mind. I was just trying to get clarity.
Right, no, but that's it. The definitions of those committees are set by me, all right? And that's by the charter. Brittany very correctly and clearly stated more to the heart of the matter what was going on. The definition on the website was different than the definition that I had given to the administration,
Yes.
all right? And we were operating for a long time with this conflict going on, not realizing where that conflict was coming from, or I was operating for a very long time, not understanding where the conflict was coming from. And the conflict clearly, as Brittany.
Yeah, so we just need to tighten our
on the website,
shoelaces.
It said one thing, and what I was saying was a very different thing.
Gotcha. Okay, so it sounds like we just need to wait for counsel, the solicitor, to get with us and say, hey, here's what's best practice.
Yeah.
Here's, and then tighten our shoelaces and go on and do
I had to ask the
Okay.
solicitor if he had any, if he was, I told him about the council's interest in the importance of having onboarding, especially for new people coming on, but
Mhm.
probably on a regular basis, having some kind of an onboarding, ask him to present his ideas about that to council. We discussed that last time, and Ms. Kramer brought up some clarification additionally that she would like with regard to specifically who the administrator reports to, because there may be some ambiguity around that.
It's
So-
caused
so-
issues in the past not having clarity.
Yeah, it's in the charter, but it sounds like it's not very clear.
It conflicts, it gives both and.
Both and.
So what happens a lot, what legal has told me is what happens a lot in municipalities, this is like what legal counsel who has experience with municipalities sees a lot,
Mhm.
is you'll have charters or you'll have like their statutory rules, then you'll see legislation that's actually in conflict with it.
Yeah.
Doesn't always get caught, but that's just like a common
Right.
municipal thing that attorneys need to work through.
Yeah.
And, I think the best practice is then come back to council and say we need legislation to clarify this.
Clarify and adjust charter.
Yeah, well, not adjust the charter, that's the residents of Gulf Manor that do that, right? The,
Charter amendments have to go on the ballot. So
Oh,
we can-
really?
We can clarify legislation and or ordinances or resolutions, but they have to follow the charter.
Okay.
so to your point about maybe it's good to review a charter every 5 years.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was just kind of what we came to back then was, because we worked with the charter and it was based on, 1934 rules and stuff like that. So it was long overdue.
Yeah.
And then we realized as we go through this and we adjusted the charter at the time, and I think we're primarily focused on how executive works and how the mayor position works at the time and the village administrator. And we realized we're kind of putting stuff in place and adjusting stuff, like how much the village administrator has the capacity to spend. What's their limit,
Right.
And now that we've kind of gone through a season or 3 of that, do we need to adjust that up or down, that kind of thing, to maintain logistical agility in the legislative
Right.
process?
Right.
That's a lot of words. So,
But
but
that, what you're talking about is legislative, and that's like the purview of this committee, and it's huge.
yeah. And so yeah, like every 5 years, you kind of you take the pulse of how things are actually working and go from there. So that was my comment on that. Okay. All right, that helps me.
Any other comments, questions before we adjourn?
I'm not sure what the mayor was referring to in his comment earlier. That was, I'm not sure what you were saying over there, I don't understand that. Regarding someone trying to overturn something in the village.
Someone trying to overturn.
What you were alluding to when we said you weren't being clear, when you were saying there was an individual who was trying to do,
I'm sorry.
I forget how you framed it, different than what was outlined.
There was a council consensus that there needed to be more transparency from the administration. And to the extent that they were not getting it from the mayor or from the administration, they wanted to take action on passing resolutions to force that. And I didn't challenge any of that. And I think that's accurate because I couldn't challenge that as mayor. I mean, that's perfectly within council's purview to pass legislation, resolutions to get more transparency in certain things. You can certainly get administration's input on, hey, here's the things to consider about that in terms of put in place. But that's what I was referring to specifically, that I wasn't stepping in with regard to some of that occurring, a lot of conversations occurring without resolutions actually ever being voted on, right? Those kind of conversations were occurring and requests being made. That's what I meant as far as.
And it was coming from committee, not
There was
council.
mission creep. Yeah, there was mission creep that was occurring to the respect that there was never any resolutions that were coming out of it, right? To the extent that there were resolutions coming out of it, then it's absolutely not mission creep. That's, I think that more clearly states if it's.
And second thing is I was under the impression that the executive committee is the one that audits the administration, or is part of that.
There was our former administrator early on, or about midway into my first term, was not happy with the evaluation system that I set up with him. And so he came to council and said that he wanted it to be more, rather than the mayor reviewing his review with executive, that he wanted executive to run it. And I never agreed with that, but the culture of the council went along with, and this was before any of these elected that may have been there, actually. The council went along, but in part of the context of this was that there wasn't, when this administrator came in, there was not a formalized way of doing reviews of anybody. So to his credit, he was putting things in place that should have been put in place a long time ago. Now, in terms of how, the question about was there continuous improvement in that, that's, don't want to get in the weeds
So
on that.
does the charter say that executive does overview the
It's,
administration?
no, it does
It
not.
says that it works with the mayor on
It says that when the mayor is, and I think this is, I'll have to check with legal on this because there was a period of time where we had a contract with the administrator that said something different than what was said in the charter, and it wasn't being pointed out that that contract was incorrect. I know in the contract, it said that the review will be conducted, but I should say I know, this is my recollection of it, that the contract said that the mayor and the executive committee would be doing the evaluations. I remember at the time, maybe Danny, you remember this, that the administrator said, I don't want my reviews done by committee, all right? But then, and that's why I was doing them early on in his tenure. But at a certain point, he then said he wanted the executive committee to be doing it. And I was happy to oblige for a while until it wasn't getting done on time. And then I decided I would start doing it in parallel with what executive committee is doing.
I don't
it. And
have,
what does the charter say?
What does the charter say about, I believe that it's either completely on me to do it in the charter, or it's one of those, the executive and the mayor, but not clear about whether they're doing it together or doing it separately. And that's where the legal ambiguity.
Do you recall?
What the charter says? I believe the charter says he reports to the mayor. I don't know if it speaks clearly on the review process. The conflict was in the contract versus the charter and what had been done prior to me getting here. So prior to me getting here, I think there was a version where it was done just by the mayor, another version where it was done by executive. When I stepped in, in December, well, January is when I came chair, I was asked to complete it, and it had just been done by executive at that point. And then we worked as an executive committee to develop a process where we said, we're not actually the ones that work with the village administrator closely, so we would like to do a 360 review with the department heads, the full executive committee, and the mayor. All of us would respond to the questions that the administrator had outlined as the process for the entire village. We'd combine those results based on the rubric that the administrator had developed and then present the response. The second year, the mayor decided to not do the process with executive, so he conducted his own, and then executive did that same process with department heads. All of executive committee compiled the results and presented it back.
So
But the
it's same
mayor
way we're
and
talking
after our first review, the mayor and a representative from executive were supposed to work with the administrator on clarifying new goals and objectives. That was something that came out of that. And then that was started. Mel was our representative from executive at that point. It was started. She had sent information to the mayor. I believe it sat for a while, and then the mayor took that with the administrator. And then by the time we did the second year review, none of that had been updated. But I think we're getting into a weird weeds conversation and gone down this route of village administrator. And I want to pull us back because the initial conversation was around what our roles are and duties as outlined for executive committee. And I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, especially since we have pending litigation.
And my point of the question was that if it states in the charter that we work with the mayor on ordering the village administrator, it was very in line for us to be on top of what's going on
Yes.
in the village, with the administration and people doing their jobs. That was my point I was getting to. I can't find it, what the wording of the charter is. That was my question.
I also can't find where in our charter it says specifically that executive, I can't find in the charter where it limits us. So I'd also like to see that information because
Yeah,
I don't see that in there.
I'm thinking the confusion is it doesn't say executive, it says council.
You're
And-
saying to David's question, it says council and the mayor should do the review? Or what are you saying? It says council
I think
too.
that may be why you're not finding anything in the charter that says the executive committee is involved in this.
I'm not finding anything about the executive committee in the charter that like defines what we are,
Right.
not in relation to the administrator.
Right, okay. Yeah, with regards, so if you search under the position of administrator was created by the charter, by the most recent charter, right? So if you look under all that, that's where you would find a clarification about how that supervision occurs. And it either says that it's all me, or it says that it's me and council, all right?
Right.
And I haven't looked at it recently myself.
And I don't want to go, diverge too much into the whole,
Yeah.
who's the administrator's boss and everything. I think that the key thing is, and if I could put words in David's mouth maybe a little bit, we probably need to identify and agree and maybe even clarify through the solicitor what needs to happen so that we can refer back to it and steer our ship properly.
Correct.
Because if we're out of the guardrails and there's no guardrails up, we're just going to flounder. So I think, and especially while we do our search for an administrator for that position, that's why I was really intrigued by what you said. It's like, okay, we need to stay focused. There's nobody else who's going to keep us focused. Let's stay focused. And to David's point, let's refer back to the charter. It's not dated back to 1934, so let's just go back to 7 years ago or whatever it was, and see what we can figure out. If it's there's too much ambiguity there, let's go to legal counsel and see what the appropriate process is to lock that down.
Right.
And that'll keep us all from straying a little bit, including me,
And
because I'm chatty.
I can tell you that the how things were left off at our most recent council meeting was that council had asked for some clarification about the relationship of council and the mayor to the administrator, or I wanted specific clarification on that. But then was happy to proceed with this, with the attorney doing some training, some, about rules of committees and, with guardrails,
Oh, okay.
all that kind of stuff.
Good.
But that kind of stuff has not been scheduled within our budget as well. And part of my upcoming report is where we are in terms of our attorney fees right now, very high.
Yeah.
So we need to consider that. We had talked about, ideally, be like, commissions and committees, you each get your own, onboarding, this year.
But hourable billing, it needs to be a consideration because,
Mhm.
and I've used this analogy, we all want to drive a BMW, but
Yeah.
sometimes we only have a Yugo budget. And yeah, we don't get what we want, maybe it's response times from EMS, maybe it's, the number of police officers we want on the street. We're a small community and we've got to adjust appropriately just to make sure that the ship doesn't sink. And fiscally, because love him or hate him, there was some leadership in place that they got everybody out of the water, and then some things kind of fogged it later. So we just need to get the keel going. And I like the fact that you're going to look at that stuff and say, hey, we've got some high expenses over here. Eric's going to chime in on that, I'm sure too, and say, hey, here's where we're spending the money, and it's going to be you and council and the residents who go, yeah, we really don't want to spend our money here. We want to spend it over here. So I'm glad to hear that.
Anything else before we close?
Eric, do you have anything to say?
Sure.
Okay, bye.
All right, motion to, our next meeting is.
Tuesday, May 5th at 7 p.m.
Thank you.
Say that again.
Tuesday, May 5th at 7 p.m.
Great, thank you. All right, motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Okay, and all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Great. All right, thank you.
May I
all.
say, I think Tuesdays are a wonderful day to have meetings because everybody's so backed up on Mondays.
It was a brilliant inspiration.
It really was.